Now, we've seen a number of manufacturers just recently who've really brought out some design issues with their bicycles, and there's been a number of recalls, and there's even been a few stopped rides. And you really have to ask yourself, are the manufacturers really able to design stuff with no checks and balances and be able to bring that to the market and it's reliable and performs as advertised? And should we as consumers be demanding that these companies need to do independent testing? So let's roll that intro and let's really have a discussion about what advantage that would give us and really why we're having these problems in the bike industry. Now, many products actually have to be tested before they're sold on the market, and generally they encapsulate some sort of safety criteria, and especially with domestic products, like products that are sold in your home for the domestic market, they have to be tested. There's specific items where there is a risk or a safety or they've been shown to cause fires, they need to be tested, and that's mandatory, and I know in Australia we have that. And then there's also testing for automobiles, because obviously automobiles do kill and are dangerous to a lot of people, so they have to have specific testing done as well, so that they meet and they perform as designed and they do what they're supposed to do. And generally what these tests are called are type tests. So what it is it's where they get one product from that design and they basically test it usually to a standard that's been written. But you can also ask for specific tests, like I can get one that's not been prescribed by the government and I can go to a test lab and ask them to test it to some standard, and they will do that because that's their business, those labs for testing. And generally these type of labs are like the CE lab or the UL lab, and these type of labs have quality assurance. They also have traceability to international standards, and they follow all of the industry guidelines. So when you see that emblem on a product, you know it's been tested to a specific standard and it's got checks and balances associated with that testing lab. Now, when we talk about the bicycle industry, in Australia here, we actually do have one bicycle component that is actually tested, and it's mandatory for the manufacturers to have that tested, and that actually is a bicycle helmet. And we have our own standard in Australia, which is the most stringent in the world for bicycle standards, and we don't actually get all of the helmets sold in Australia because of that. And I think the fee for them to get tested is about $6,000 Aussie, and every batch that the manufacturer makes, that has to be repeated. It's not just one type test, so it's pretty stringent for the bicycle industry and the bicycle helmets in Australia. But this could be extended to other components, and we could have, when there's a new design, like for a bicycle company to basically say, hey look, this design, this manufacturing is really good. They send it to one of these labs and they can have it tested, or they can ask a test for them to do a test that they would have done in-house. And obviously what's happening in-house, there's something being left out, because these products are brought to the market and they're actually not performing as advertised, or they have some issues when they're sold to the general public. Now, a lot of people might say there's magazines, like GCN and Cycling Tips, and even people like Peak Torque, who have done some testing for wind space and their wheels, and these are independent tests. Well, with some of the magazines, I would probably say they're sponsored, and if you actually watch those videos carefully, you can actually see that they need to say somewhere that this video is sponsored. And when it's sponsored, it does have some bias. And really, these people doing this are not test labs. I mean, even Peak Talk, he's an engineer and he has certain expertise, and I bet with some sorts of products he could actually do a really good test. But when you send it to a testing lab, they are all set up and they know how to set up tests to do all sorts of products. They do a multitude of things, and all of their instruments and everything are calibrated and they're traceable to international standards. They've got a very stringent quality assurance, usually a quality assurance lab document that they have to follow. They have very specific ways they need to record the tests, and so it keeps everything very much within a very controlled environment when they're tested. And the unfortunate thing is, because bicycles are really kind of seen as a recreational device or a toy as far as for kids and so forth, the government has pretty much kept their hands off the bicycle industry, except for things like helmets, well, in Australia anyway. And this is where I think that the bicycle industries get away with a little bit more than they should. And this is where I'm going to ask you guys, do you think that bicycle manufacturers should be at least giving us confidence in their product, and when they're charging these prices of 10 grand upwards US, really should we really see some checks and balances from those products, because they're of the price of some cheaper motorbikes and even some cheaper cars, and those products need to have independent testing done. Well, okay guys, that's where I'm going to leave it. And leave your comments down below, and you tell me, do you think that the bicycle industry is fine? Do you think that it's probably going a little bit too far to have these independent tests? Or do you think that there's been enough problems with these bikes that we really need to develop a high level of confidence in the components we're getting on these bikes? Okay guys, I'll see you next vid. Cheers.